off, I want to start by thanking Governor Jindal. His direct involvement has been instrumental in bringing a lot of this about and bringing Texas Brine, I think, to a point to where hopefully they can meet with the residents and meet the financial demands of the residents of what you've been going through. For those of you that want relocation, we hope the process is fair, we hope the process is just, and we hope you get the financial resources you need to be able to relocate and move on with your lives. But of equal importance is the governor's commitment for those that want to stay, that we are committed and the state is committed to making sure that Texas Brine is held accountable to make sure that the environment is taken care of and that those that want to stay, that their needs are addressed as well. We want to ensure the people of Bayou Corne, the fact that people are relocating and may want to move on with their lives, that it's not going to be an end to the process of remediating all that's taking place here. We want to fight this out to the end. We want our environment, we want our bayous, we want our waterways back where they were before this event occurred. The governor has committed the state agencies and his full support to making sure that happens. We really appreciate that, Governor, and we appreciate your support. We have been fighting this for 7 months now. We have not let up. I know a lot of the residents have been frustrated, and I understand, and we can about imagine the stress that all of you have been under. But we want you to understand from the parish level, we've been here since the beginning and we're going to stay here. We're committed to working with you to see that this matter is resolved. We hope Texas Brine comes up and offers fair compensation packages for those residents that want to relocate. And for those of you that are staying, we want you to know we're going to fight it out to the end. It's a long-term process. As one resident said in the meeting, it's a very serious situation, and let's not minimize it. Let's not minimize it. It's a very, very serious situation that we're dealing with. It is unprecedented, an unprecedented event in Assumption Parish. We are all learning as we go as parish officials. We have always stated we're relying upon state support to give us the resources and the technical expertise to address this problem. They're here. Let's see that it's done right. We have one chance of fixing this issue, and let's see that it's done right so that the residents of Assumption Parish and our environment is taken care of. We're here for you, and we're going to fight this out to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I too want to thank the governor and his staff for being engaged in this incident. Let me assure you, the governor gets it. He understands this. He got his attention, and he takes this incident serious. He's committed to resources. Understand the state of Louisiana has not been reimbursed $1 to Texas Brine or its shore. But they're going to stay engaged. They're going to see it through. They'll make the recovery later. And more importantly, I want to thank the people here at Bayou Corne, Grand Bayou. You've been extremely patient in this process. You've made my job easy. My priority when this incident began is your personal safety and making sure that we protect your property while you're evacuated. And for the most part, it's been without incident. And it's not because we do our job that good, it's because of you the people, who have been very patient and civil through this process. When you feel your pain, we're going to stay with you, we're going to see it through. Just understand, we're here, we're committed, and the governor's going to stay with us, okay? Understand that. There's no late getting here.
We've been told, and they've missed many deadlines, whether it involved the interim payment process or whether it involved the earlier commitment about the highlight. The reality is, state agencies have been here from the very first day. The reality is, we shared the residents' frustration that several times, not only has Texas Brine told them things, they told us, they made commitments to us that they haven't kept. And that's one of the reasons last week we finally brought them together with local officials, say enough's enough. It's time to offer the buyout to the residents that want it. I do want to echo something that Marty said, which is the buyouts are certainly voluntary. It's not going to be for everybody. For folks that want it, it should be an option. For folks that don't want it, Texas Blind, this does not absolve them of their responsibility to make it right, to clean up the mess that they have caused. So for those that want the opportunity to have a buyout, they should have that option. For those that want to stay, Texas Blind has an obligation to clean up the mess they've created, and we're going to hold them accountable to make sure they do it.
Governor over here. I wanted to ask you, most of the folks got notice of this meeting at about 8:30. There are many people in this community who work, and this meeting was at 2 when there's a community meeting at 6. Could you discuss the scheduling thought there and why maybe it didn't happen at a time where more of the working residents could have attended the meeting?
We'll be happy to find a way not to continue to meet with folks. The important thing is we address their concerns. We put the information up on the local blog. We work with local officials to find a time where we get everybody together. The important thing is we address these. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to make sure that people are treated well and treated fairly. What we have told Texas Blind again and again is just offering the buyouts isn't enough. The proof is going to be in the results. The proof is going to be whether people voluntarily accept the offers they make. So that's the next step in terms of trying to help people in the short term is to see what those buyouts look like and see if people actually find them acceptable. We've also said we're moving forward with a contingency plan with the LA 70 monitoring. Continue forward with the other monitoring, the other steps that I outlined before in terms of the 6 next steps. The important thing, David, I think, is that we make the situation right. Well, look, 2 things. One, we've got legal action. We told them, they told us they said they're 50-50 appointments to local. We said that's fine. The real proof is going to be people actually voluntarily accept the offer they make. I want to make sure those are fair offers. I want to make sure that those offers actually meet the needs of folks that want the opportunity to sell their property or to use. And so the next step, we told the company we're going to be coming back to the table. And some of you asked last time, they may dispute local folks are being treated well by the company. Obviously, we are going to be pushing them to pay our bills as well. They haven't done that. You heard Marty said they haven't paid $1 yet in terms of what they owe the state, in terms of the millions of dollars we've spent and already billed the company for. The AG is taking the lead in that effort to make sure they actually pay the bills to us and the local government. Because the next step will be, now they've scheduled these appointments, now let's see if they're actually making reasonable offers that are acceptable to people that live in the community. That's the most important thing. And we've told them we're going to bring them back to the table to make sure they do this. Nick?
Governor, you've outlined the plan moving forward as far as accountability and that's so forth, but are you planning any sort of future visits here to the community as this plan kind of takes shape and moves forward?
Look, we'll continue. We made commitments with Texas Blind, local officials, and others. We're going to continue. We've been engaged from the very first day. We're going to continue to be engaged, whatever it takes to make sure this gets done right. And that may be additional visits, there may be additional meetings with the company that we will continue to push forward to make sure this gets done right. The Blue Ribbon Commission is, I think, another very important step forward, and that we're going to have national and international experts to help us to make sure that, and again, I want to reiterate this, the buyouts are a voluntary option for those that want to move. For those that want to stay, Texas Blind has an obligation to make this right. That commission, that Blue Ribbon Commission of Experts, which will include a representative of the community, I think will be a very important step to hold them accountable, to make sure the folks that want to stay here, the folks that are coming back, they clean up the environmental damage that they've caused.
Governor, did you see the sinkhole and what did you think?
I did. We had the chance to see the sinkhole. One of the points I made to the company, I know they had to suspend some of the skimming operations. They do the seismic testing. I think it is important that as soon as it's safe for them, they go out there and start skimming some of that material again. You can see a sheen on top of the sinkhole, obviously. You know, Marty said this was unprecedented for Assumption Parish. I don't think this has ever happened anywhere in terms of the failure of a cavern wall. And that's why it is so important that not only do they make this right, but also make sure this doesn't happen again. I want to applaud your local legislators. I know Karen and Rick have indicated they'll be bringing legislation in the next session
to give Louisiana some of the strongest oversight and regulations in the entire country for cavern operations. So to make sure that every operator, whether it's Texas Brine or another company, is following the strictest, strongest rules in the entire country. We're going to support that legislation. So one of the comments I did make to the company was, as soon as it's safe for them to do so, they do need to get out there and start skimming again, because you do have a sheen, and that likely came from Sunday. You know, the so-called seismic activity, or the burp that they noticed that produced activity from subsurface. You can see a visible sheen on the surface of the water out there.
Governor, do you know what's going to happen with the sinkhole? Is there going to be any attempt to drain it or to get rid of it somehow?
Look, I think that a couple of things in terms of next steps. The first thing we've got to get is that seismic data to understand, to get a better understanding of what's going on down there. The first step it will be in terms of finding out, for example, how much natural gas is down there. How could, you know, I know they've got some pressure tests, some initial readings, but the first step in terms of before we can get to the cleanup phase for the surface is to make sure the subsurface is stable. And so even as they clear the surface of the sheen and some of the other environmental solvents, they build a berm to contain the contaminants. The real next step in terms of controlling environmental damage is to get stability in the subsurface. It wouldn't make any sense to fill in the surface if you had subsurface instability, because you could just have future problems again. After they do that, then we'll move to the surface cleaning operations. But be assured, part of their responsibility is to make sure they clean up the mess. That includes the surface mess. But our focus, even as they skim the surface for those contaminants, and we build the berm to contain the contaminants, we got to get subsurface stability first. And so that's why the seismic testing is so important. That's why the efforts to either fill in the cavern and or vent the gas are so important. We got to get subsurface stability first.
As far as Texas Brine has been postponing the deadline and things of that nature so far, how confident in them are you that they will come up with a successful solution for this and meet that?
Two things. One, it's trust but verify. We don't take anything at face value, and that's why, for example, even with the buyouts, we want to see a response. Secondly, in terms of making sure that they do what they're going to say, we're not going to just take their word for it. We're going to make sure that through the Blue Ribbon Commission, for example, we're not going to take their assurances that we've got subsurface stability or their assurances that the area is safe. We're going to have experts from the academic world, from the federal government, including the USGS, from our contractors, including CBI and others. We're going to have an independent Blue Ribbon Commission, so we're not going to just take their word for it. We're going to have an independent verification that it is safe, when it is safe for folks to come back.
Will there be penalties in place if they do not live up to their
Yes.
Governor, getting a chance today to hear some of the people's stories, some of the residents' stories, what did you get out of that, and what were you hearing from them?
Look, I think the most important thing, and they can certainly speak for themselves, one of the most important things you get is folks are rightfully frustrated. This has been a long time. Obviously, they want, look, folks, they don't want, in the ideal world, they don't want to check from Texas Brine. They want their lives back. They'd much rather this never happened in the first place. They're not looking for anything other than to get their lives back. They live in a very beautiful part of a great state, and I think there's a lot of frustration that this is taking so long. And I wish there were easy answers, and I wish that we could tell them when this was all going to conclude. What we can tell them is that we will hold Texas Brine accountable. We will bring in the best experts to make sure they can have confidence that when it is safe, they will be safe to go back. But I think the overwhelming sentiment from the folks I heard, I think folks were pleased that at least Texas Brine's beginning to offer. Now, they'll see what the actual offers are, but at least they're beginning that process. They thought that was a good step forward. They want to see what the offers are before they can decide whether those are reasonable or not. But I think the overwhelming sense, and I certainly don't blame folks, is frustration. Their lives have been interrupted by something they didn't cause to happen, and they simply want Texas Brine to make it right so this can all be done so they can go back and have the great lives they had before this all started.